Okay, welcome again to ACE's November program. Today, we will be talking about employee retention strategies in the new paradigm with Tara Jenkins and Frances Everly. Tara is the founder of Conscious Revolution, an organization that partners with leaders to build conscious businesses. As one of the first certified conscious capitalism consultants in the world and a certified B Corp, she is devoted to building profitable businesses that make the world a better place. Tara has spent her 25-year career shaping leadership and culture as an HR and DEI leader in various industries, companies, and countries for national and global organizations. Tara is the founder of the Maine Conscious Business Collective and the board chair for Prosperity Maine. She lives in Scarborough, Maine with her husband, 2 children, and a menagerie of pets. Frances Everly. Frances helps leaders to grow by helping them increase their confidence and expertise to improve their performance and results. He is a thought leader, author, and executive coach at Price Associates and has been a leader himself at several organizations. He works in many industries as people anchor them all. He uses a suite of assessment tools to build self-awareness and awareness of others, emotional intelligence, and for feedback so leaders know their impact on others. He is certified as a coach, the assessment tools, and digital facilitation. His book, Connected Leadership, now has a workbook for leaders and their teams. So take it away, Frances.
Thank you, Terry. And good morning, everyone, again. I recognize many of you, but not everyone. So I'm glad that you're here. Tara and I, as we begin to put this together, we're going to focus this really from the business perspective. So the consultants that are here, we're going to sort of maybe do some little twists every so often so you can sort of latch on to some of these ideas. But this is a really big issue. And so I want to sort of begin this. And Tara and I, when we began putting this together, I was reminded of a story. And I think it's very pertinent for the situation here. And it goes back some time. And I was in high school looking for work. I found a summer job, and it turned out that it was a low-income housing unit, and they needed help leveling out sand in the cellars. So that was my job. So I would crawl into cellars and shovel sand. Well, there were 2 other people that were there in these cellars with me, and one was about 25, the other was about 30. And they do this kind of, I guess, odd jobs all the time. Well, I was quite excited as a high school student to have this work. And I'd be shoveling sand. And they'd be looking at me going, what are you, why are you working so hard? What are you doing? They're like, telling stories and sitting down and smoking and having a grand old time. And I didn't really think much about it. And you're probably wondering why I'm telling you this story. Well, the point of it is that these 2 folks really were not engaged, right? It's a menial task. I had motivation because of my age, what I wanted to get out of it. They had no attention at all to it. And there's a term you often, or you may have heard today, called quiet quitting. Well, it's not new. It's been around for a long time. But there is something that has changed, and that is the workforce. And they're looking for different things. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. The dynamic that has occurred for the people that are looking for work. And what are those aspects that are going to make them more engaged? And what's the result of that? And to help them stay. Last night, and Rick, you certainly can identify this. I was talking to somebody who owns a hotel and restaurant, and they were saying, I don't know anybody who's got full employment. We're having really a difficult time keeping people here. So it's a reality for us. That's another dimension. And this is a demographic issue, which is, the baby boomers are finally retiring. And, as they do, they're, the next generation moves in. Well, there just aren't enough of the next generation, Xers, to fill those shoes. So just numbers wise, there just aren't. So millennials move in, the millennials move out, the Zs move in. You may have some of those people in your workforce. They look for different things. And so we'll talk more in detail about that. So with that, I'm going to let Tara take over here. And move into the slides. So let me put the slides up.
Thank you, Francis. Wonderful to be with all of you. Also see some familiar faces and new faces. So happy to be here with you this morning and recognize everyone's time is incredibly valuable and that we do really want this to be interactive. So feel free, pop a question into the chat if something comes up for you, or if there's a topic you'd like us to cover together more deeply, or you have a question for the group. This is really to make sure that we add the most value as possible for everybody. So you can go to the next slide, Francis. Thank you.
Okay.
And I think we heard a little bit about this already, or I'm sure you can resonate, or some of this resonates with you. And I'd just love to hear in the chat, if you wouldn't mind, take a look at what we have in this numbered list 1 through 5, and put in the chat which one is the most relevant for you at this moment, either in your business or in your consulting practice as you're working with clients that are going through particular challenges. Which one is the one that's the most present or relevant? You just throw that in the chat once you have a chance to read. We'd love to sort of get some trends going with this group.
So for those of us that are consultants, can we speak for our clients?
Yes, you should be doing that. Yep. Yes, please do. Yeah, so seeing lots come in, looks like a lot of 1 and a lot of 3s. No surprise there. Did everyone have a chance? I'm just going to open up the chat a little bit more. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that, for sharing that. And really, as we were talking about before, if you're growing in particular, or you happen to be in a higher turnover industry, this is where number 1 can be felt even more acutely. And I run into with my clients a lot of number 3, which was also noted in the chat, of the challenge and really very real fear of, I do have underperformers in my organization, and I'm not satisfied with the work that they're doing. And that's just a sort of natural part of running an organization, that you have employees that can't be successful in the job that they've been placed in. But to do the performance management process and potentially exit them out of the organization has a gaping hole that employers are really worried they can't fill. So it's very related to number 1, very interrelated. Thank you. Yeah, so we're gonna touch on many of these things today. I suspect for most of this group, this may be a reset or a reminder of a lot of the things that we inherently know, or if you're running businesses, these are the fundamental things that we often look for, like a silver lining or a magic pill or a silver bullet or whatever it may be, as a quick fix. And there isn't one. The organizations that really run well and attract and retain employees, they have put, as you all know, a lot of thought and work and effort over many years to make that type of organization. And so what we're going to be talking about is wherever you are in that process, or wherever your clients may be in that process, what is the next step? What is the natural next step in that evolution, in maturing your organization and helping it to become an organization that attracts and retains talent, even in a talent crisis like we're describing from this slide. Next, Francis.
Okay. Do you want to go through these, or how you want to do these?
Yeah. Why don't you put them all up on the screen if you don't mind? Thank you. Yeah, so we know that there's a big representation of lots of different people here and groups here, and that you're working with lots of different clients. And so one of the things that we want to recognize is everything, it goes without saying, and everyone's sort of touched on this a little bit in their introduction, that while, as Francis was mentioning, we've always had this quiet quitting phenomenon, what we want to really think about here in all the different industries that we work in and work with is that I think we all maybe inherently know that this is really quite a different time. I've worked in HR for about 25 years, as Terry mentioned, and we always talked about in human resources, the war for talent. Like that was always a thing. Like, oh, we're in a war for talent. We're in a war for talent. HR was always saying that because we wanted managers to pay attention to candidates and understand that they couldn't, you know, how to treat employees and all of those things. But until like recently, I could say like, I don't think that we were in a war. We didn't know what the war really was. And as Terry mentioned, and as Francis mentioned, the employer and employee dynamic has really changed. And it runs across industries, whether you're working from home, whether you're working in food manufacturing or food service, whether you're working in an office environment or manufacturing and construction environment, the game has totally changed. And we hope that that's something that we all take away from the discussion together, is that the way that we think of the employee-employer relationship is often quite outdated and is being pushed to be redefined. Okay, you can go to the next one.
Okay.
So we're wondering, again, more group participation, because we really want to hear from you, what you're experiencing around turnover in your organizations. And anyone can feel free to jump in just in on screen or put in the chat. Explain to us like what you're experiencing. And this could be, again, all these questions could refer to your clients if you're a consultant or to your business. And we're curious what you're experiencing with turnover. Are you having higher turnover? Are you sensing there's this quiet quitting phenomenon that's even deeper than it may have been before? Or are employees asking for different things than they used to? Because we know this is a national phenomenon, but we're really interested in hearing from your direct experience. Catherine, you've put in stay. Do you mean that people are staying? I think that's what you mean, but I want to make sure, which is great if that's true.
Yeah, I've had one of my best employees for 4 years.
Awesome.
And I had interns who were like, I loved working for you. Can I please come back? But I don't have a position.
Too bad. We have to
But
get
but what's interesting is we were going to do a program on recruitment and retention. And now it's a bit of a twist where people are saying now the recession is coming. And I don't know whether it's more national than what it is here, but saying that they're not as eager to hire and get people on because they're more worried about the recession. So I don't know if anybody's seeing that. That's the first time, because I haven't heard that from my members. They've been like, oh, I need people, I need people, I need people. And then we were just on a call and they said, ooh, maybe we don't, because people are getting a little worried about the recession. So I'm kind of curious to see if the twist is happening in Maine.
Yeah, great questions. Well, first, Catherine, I want to acknowledge if people are eager to work for your organization and work with you, that says a lot about your leadership. As people know.
Thank you, we try. We're small and mighty.
No, we have to celebrate Catherine. I'm sure many others on this call. And that's an interesting question. So feel free, anyone, to jump in to answer Catherine's question, of whether you're seeing that sort of flip of employers getting more concerned about the in some places a projected recession and what that might mean for their business versus being more in a panic mode around attracting and retaining talent. So any input is welcome, because we want to hear from all of your experience watching the Twitter saga. Yes, Carrie, thank you for pointing that out. Me too. It's absolutely fascinating watching the Twitter saga for lots of reasons. And some other things in the chat, Terry mentioning employees not reliable and wanting flexibility, but really hard to have that manufacturing, totally hear that, have a manufacturing client as well. And that's extraordinarily challenging.
This is Leanne. I was going to say the same thing that Terry was saying, is that the reliability, but it's really, as we've already talked about and just mentioned, the generational, we have 5 generations in the workforce, and they're completely opposite from the older baby boomers down to the younger generation. So here we have a really pretty good mix. We have 110, 111 employees, and we have a pretty good mix of the youngers and the olders, but the reliability of those that are older is absolutely fantastic. So as much as I'd like to say, I'll take 100 of those, there's still, I'm seeing now a few more in that younger generation that are eager now to work. And I'm not sure what's changed, because during COVID, I couldn't get, anybody to work. I couldn't find anybody to work. I'm starting to see some more people entering the workforce at younger ages, 18, 19, 20, in manufacturing. And as much as our work is really heavy work, it's lifting cast iron, and it's not something that's, you know, they could go somewhere else and just do something very light. I found, you know, quite a few young ones that are willing to do it and want the overtime. So I'm not sure what exactly has changed. I mean, maybe there's not so much money on the table anymore. So they need to, or maybe getting out of their homes and having to want to start something on their own. But that's, I mean, we're fortunate that way, but it has not been easy during this whole 2 or 3 year struggle with COVID of finding people. The people that are, I mean, wages was a big thing. So we changed a lot with our wages, increased that a lot for manufacturing. And definitely I see a trend that's not gonna stop for a while either. So we really do pride ourselves in the work-life balance, and we're really we're really a company that values employee opinions and ideas, and we really show that. I've been in HR again like 25, 30 years, and working for this company I've worked for several companies, and they walk the talk. They are absolutely fantastic, and it's hard to find those companies. So I try to tell that to employees, those who start here, that you might not find this balance somewhere else. It might be hard work, but we really give a lot of time off. We do great with our benefits. We contribute a lot to it. So I try to do more education that way, especially for the younger ones. The older folks know, they already know. They've been at other places and they know. So we're lucky that way, but it's constant. I mean, recruiting has been the big thing for me in the last 2 or 3 years. So
yeah, Leanne, you're really pinpointing something important, I think. One around the education, particularly for the younger generations that don't have any points of comparison about what the work experience is supposed to be. It's very easy to get pretty entitled or not appreciative when you haven't had a contrasting experience of having a really bad manager or a company that doesn't seem to care about you. And so you just think this is the deal. Like when you're starting total, like, oh, this is fantastic. I'm like, this is the way it is. And I was doing a session this week with a bunch of students. They were asking me to come in and talk about conscious business and what they should be thinking about as they embark on their careers. And I was emphasizing to them, and this is really something that is mentioned in the chat in a couple of places. So thank you for all the rich comments in the chat around really that we have an epidemic in the United States and really across the world in my global experience of poor leadership. And a piece of that, as I think you mentioned, Joyce, yes, is a lot of the core competencies around leadership being emotional intelligence and listening being one of those pieces, is that you could say that the older generations always needed and wanted those things. I certainly believe that. I know that I did as an employee, but I didn't feel as much as emboldened, I think, as the younger generations do to demand it.
right.
And so when they don't show up or when they're not as reliable, or what I find with my clients is that we tend to go to like, they're the problem. And I always like to just step back and say, like, is there something we should be doing in our process or our systems or in the way that we're thinking about this differently? Because the way that we're doing it isn't working. And we're the ones that are suffering. So how do we think about this differently? And the solutions aren't easy. The solutions to any of these things are not easy for sure. But we
we're
have
gonna be doing this, going over the solutions pretty soon. But to Catherine, to your point about are people sort of staying anchored now, worried about the recession, I think one of the things that's happening is actually it's counterintuitive. What some people are starting to do is look for other jobs just in case where they're working is going to let them go. And there's an easy fix. It doesn't cost you anything, which is to make sure you're clear to your employees how your business is doing, what the future looks like, where their role in that is. Because if they don't know that, they could be out the door. or looking. Anyway, so and industry specific changes are going to be, unique. But yeah, so there's the dynamic, there's always turnover. It's just, it's harder to control it now. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, so Francis, if you could put up the next slide, we'll do that briefly, and then I'll turn it over to you we'll start to get into some of the solutions.
Okay. So do you see the bus again?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just checking.
Yep.
And you want to do this next one?
Yep. Great. We wanted to just show, it's always important to look at data and get grounded in data. And this is an important survey from Gallup. It won't be surprising to you probably as an individual walking around in the world, but also as what you're hearing from employees, which is another differentiator in this day and age around the levels of daily stress and worry. And we know that this isn't even in just US adults, of course. If you look at any of the data, it certainly transcends into our younger generations as well. And so what people are bringing into the workplace is completely different than it has been in the past in terms of the complexity of issues that they are facing as individuals and as members of our society. And so it's just something to continue to keep in mind. And you can obviously see a huge spike in 2020, which makes sense, but that we're always in general trending up. And thinking about what are the ways that we think about that in our workplaces a little bit differently. What are the support structures? What are the ways that we help our employees to handle their lives holistically ends up being a differentiator. I think those of us who work with clients know the differentiation of clients that really put in those more holistic programs for employees. And those of us who are running our organizations often can see the difference it makes when you have a really good leader that thinks about the employee and the whole employee rather than what the employee is doing solely for the organization. And so it serves as a really important reminder that this level of stress and worry is not likely to decrease, it's likely to increase, and us thinking about how to alter our practices and our benefits and our support structures for employees will solve some of the issues that we're experiencing around turnover and retention. I'll turn it over to you, Francis.
Great, thanks, Tara. So just to stay with a few more pieces of information to kind of frame what's the dynamic in the current workforce, how it's changed. If we look at sort of a generational perspective, and I've heard this from clients, boy, my employees, want to raise right off. They've only been working for a short amount of time, but you can see in terms of the numbers here, the younger employees really will ask quite quickly. And you've probably seen this. You can put it in the chat if you've observed this. They're also twice as likely to ask about a promotion than certainly older employees. And I think, Leanne, you talked about your older employees seem to be more satisfied and working well. And they're also 3 times likely to switch if they don't like it. And this is where we already sort of hinted on this. And I don't know if, as a leader, whether this is embarrassing for you or not. But the main reason that people leave is because they have a bad boss, and it is the top. Salary is usually kind of competing for it, but often second. And a lot of it has to do with them not paying attention to the employee. And you can see from this dynamic on this data here that the current younger workforce has different needs and different ways to go about this. Now, you may also think that this is going to cost you money, and we'll talk about solutions, and it isn't always about money. There are other ways of helping employees feel more comfortable, actually excited about being in work. So I'm looking at the chat here, and yeah, so I can see from Carrie, or you've got something in the chat. Yeah, so this sort of uncertainty or not knowing where they are and what they want, and sometimes we have to help them. So moving forward into trying to get into what we can do about this is often companies will say, let's make it fun. Let's have it enjoyable. So we'll put in, you hear about ping pong tables or foosballs or having open cafeterias and those kinds of things. Well, those are great, but that's really not the whole picture. And it gets a little deeper, and this has to do with the generational changes. So what they actually say they want is multidimensional, and it isn't necessarily fun. They want to connect to the purpose of the organization. Why am I here? How is this helping the world? And I'm going to feel good about helping the world, and their own purpose or values. Supporting them, and we'll go into detail about this. It does include salary, but it also includes non-cash supports, and then respect, which is really the psychological safety. You know, we've been through a social movements, and we're still in them, and this is still an issue for a lot of people. So we need to pay attention to these things as you think about your employees. Okay, so Tara.
Yeah, so we're gonna, I think, talk about a lot of things that, based on what we're seeing in the chat and seeing on people's faces, are very familiar or hopefully resonant with this group. But I know for me, every time I see lists like this, even though this is work I do, it reaffirms and also reminds me, oh, I could do something deeper there. I could think about something differently here as a business owner and also with my clients. So we hope that that's what the impact of this is for you. So we're going to talk about and the words we're using here are purpose, support, and respect as really three key components that include a lot in each of them, but key components of what employees are looking for today, regardless of generation, but maybe more acutely or with less patience, depending on the generation. And we're going to walk you through some key differentiators that we have seen and have experienced ourselves as employees. And then really keep in mind that we want to hear, and we'll have a discussion after we've gone through each of these segments about what you've tried in either with your clients or in your organization, what you found to be particularly successful, or what you're struggling with, or what you'd like to try and would love to hear about other people's experience. So we're going to go through a little bit of an overview and then have a discussion. You can go to the next slide. So we're going to talk through some retention fundamentals. And of course, retention also leads to attraction, because we know, particularly in Maine, it's a small place. Word of mouth is really strong about how good employers are known in our towns and in our cities. And so word travels fast. And that is how many of my clients actually get their new employees, is either through direct referrals from their current employees or through word of mouth. So retention fundamentals is making sure that the people that are there want to stay there, but also that they are talking up your organization as total brand ambassadors just by the nature of their great experience. And the first thing that we talk about with retention is purpose, and it really is linked to the second one, meaning. Making sure, and as we've seen in the data, I'm sure, and the statistics, is that younger generations are looking for purpose and meaning in their work. It's as simple as that. And the meaning part can be very individualized, of course, but when you look at what sort of Rick has behind him on his wall, which I really appreciate, where it has the vision and the values, posted right behind him, the articulation of the vision and the values is a really important way to attract and retain employees that have that alignment. Now, I know that this would be the case at Rick's organization, but there are many places, and you probably have worked at some of them, where the values are listed on a poster on the wall, but they don't mean anything to the employee experience. They are just really literally on the wall. Employees don't actually know what they are, and they're not embedded in the day-to-day practices of the organization. And most importantly, they're not used as a decision-making tool, which is the most powerful part of values. Yes, walking the talk, as Rick is saying. And so actually, in the organizations that I have worked in as an employee, and then with as clients, it can be more harmful to have a bunch of values posted on the wall and then have them not be embedded, because people see that as hypocrisy, understandably. And it feels disingenuous, it feels misaligned. And so the purpose and the meaning and the values really all coming together as this critical foundation or package. And those things are really not easy to do well. So let's not pretend that doesn't take a lot of work. It is worth it for sure. I would say worth it just even for the leaders that are doing it. The impact in the organization is significant, but the leaders, if you are the leader of your organization, or you are leading a bunch of leaders reporting in and you have a larger organization, those leaders need purpose and meaning in their work in order to lead the way you need them to lead to retain employees. So this foundational, fundamental, essential stuff is, if you aren't investing enough time in it, if this gives you recognition, like, I could be embedding that more. I'm not sure how we do that. Or is there more opportunities to deepen that in my organization? Like, take the opportunity, because there's nothing more important than these things. I'll just comment quickly about purpose. So in the conscious business space, we talk a lot about purpose, and purpose and vision and mission often get confused or a little bit muddled in organizations, and everyone's kind of using that language a little bit differently, which is totally fine. Diversity is wonderful. The way that we think about purpose in the conscious business space is that it is your ultimate why. Why does your business exist? And I would bet for many of us that have clients, if you ask your clients why their business exists, or let's just say you ask the leadership team, the CEO and maybe the direct reports of the CEO, why does the business exist? You will not get consistency in their answers. That's a pretty big opportunity. And the why, and I'll just share in the conscious business space, what the why really is you're solving a worthy problem in the world. Why? And that's the meaning behind the work. Now, I have not ever had a client where we couldn't determine the worthy problem they're solving in the world. And sometimes they'll say, well, I just make this, or I just do that. That's not the why. So it takes sometimes a process to discover it, but it is worth it to do it. It is the motivation. It is the way an organization can zoom forward. It's kind of like a slow down to speed up scenario. And then the number 4 that's listed there is what Francis and I thought it was important to highlight, that a lot of organizations may embed the word caring or care into their values. But what most employees experience, and maybe you've experienced as well, is that there's a limit to the care that an organization will give an employee. It's a care to the extent that the employee is working at the organization and delivering what they're supposed to be delivering for the organization. And what we're talking about with care that really differentiates an organization and its culture is a care that you care for the whole person. You care for the employee, you as a person, as a human, a fellow human walking around in the world. They happen to be doing something that's important for the organization, but you care about them regardless. Employees know when that feels different. They know when their manager really cares about them as a person versus cares about them as a person delivering particular outcomes. And we want to underscore the difference between those two. Now, that's not something that you can just like automatically tell your managers, like, care about your employees and they're going to do it. Some of that is like how people are built. But many of our organizational cultures are not built around helping leaders actually care deeply for their employees. The processes and the practices and the systems that we've put in place are not designed for that. So it's an opportunity to step back and say, like, how do we write things to our employees? And what does our performance evaluation process look like? And how do we talk about our culture? And so these are the things that, these aren't easy. They require some deep introspection and reflection. But Francis and I really want to underscore their worth exploring much more deeply and continuing to practice, because they require continual care and affirmation in the organization. So I just want to pause before we go on to some more ideas to check in with the group around what you're thinking about, what's working for you currently, what you see as real opportunities with your clients or in your organization. Yes, Doug, please go ahead.
Recently in a peer group meeting, I ended up getting one of the best compliments of my career. The person that was the featured member said in front of his group, "I've gone soft and I blame you, Packard." his and his company's doing great, and his blood pressure's down, and on and on and on and on. But just like, every
So
once
what
in
do
a
you
while,
what do you think he meant, Doug, when he said I've gone soft? I kind of would make some assumptions, but what did that
well,
mean?
he was a college football player, and you know how it is, 25, 30 years ago, the image of what a leader was supposed to be, and not vulnerable and not emotional and all these things. And so I've just let the high quality individual help the high quality individual that was in there, let it show more often. And now he's got a great management team, and goes to his camp every weekend. And like I say, he's off blood pressure medication. He's down to his college playing weight. So.
Oh, well done, Doug. That is so exciting. Well, you're
But
pointing to something so important that we can't underscore enough. What this does for the leader, and doing this work for the leader is life-changing often. And what the leader has been taught often is that old paradigm of leadership, which was like, I need to have all the answers and I am in charge and in control. Like, that's still very present in our society. And it sounds like, Doug, you were very successful in moving from that definition of success to a different definition of success and making the work more meaningful and fulfilling for the leader, which then cascaded through the organization. So amazing story. I love those types of stories. Thank you for sharing.
I did want to make one other point from earlier that I think we're all going to face. I'm facing it, and that is because of the labor shortage. I've got a number of my clients who have moved their financial model to based on labor versus sales, and it doesn't mean they aren't looking for people. Doesn't mean they don't want to grow, but they just realize that this shortage is going to happen or be here with us for several more years. And so in most cases, they're actually making more money, and they're less stressed, and they're getting more selective about customers. So in a way, it's good for the leader, but it's not good for Maine, and it's not good for the economy. And so we got to figure out, between us consultants and state and colleges, et cetera, the workforce development program and the Alphons, how to solve this once forever, man. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really good points. Any other thoughts before, and some great stuff in the chat, if you're seeing it or want to make sure you don't miss it, and some really important pieces around, of course, people know when we're not walking the talk or where there's not embodiment. Robert, want to call out your employee engagement piece? Absolutely. That's been a major trend. I think the caution for all of us is to think about how employee engagement is measured or defined. Because it often doesn't include some of the things that we're talking about in this segment. And then certainly the culture piece, getting some great comments about how to think about culture. And to your point, Rick, like, this isn't necessarily in any chronological order of importance. This is just 5 things we think you should consider. So culture certainly could be considered like the umbrella underneath or in support of all of these things. So I'll turn it back to Francis to continue the discussion. Thank you for all the great important thoughts.
Thanks, Tara. Couple of other things related to this. I don't need to go into detail, but she mentioned about purpose, how important it is. This is some data that says if you actually are purposeful, which means you are implementing your purpose regularly, you're going to see a much better performance than even if you just have it on the wall, which is what she said. So this is just a graphic to show you that distinction. And community or culture is really hard to define. And we're not going to go through all of these aspects here, but you can see it involves the way in which you communicate and share and interact with your employees, the goals and the commitments that they might have, camaraderie. Are they building friendships? And I'll talk a little bit more about that, and adaptation and unity. So these are just components. And when Tara said it's not easy to do these things, it's because the role of a leader has changed in that they can't just say, do this, right? And you can't assume if they're going to know what to do when you want them to do something. That has to be very, very clear. So let's look at retention for a little bit here. And we'll go through this in a similar fashion in that here are 4 components. The last one's a little different, and I'll explain that. But we all know about onboarding and training. And so when you bring someone in, or when the company brings someone in, do they pretty much have them? And Leanne, you might relate to this, but you do the HR requirements. So they fill out the paperwork, they make sure they know where they're going to be, what their job role is or expectations, and how clear that is really important. Well, that's really not enough these days, because people want to be connected. The employees want to be connected. So do you give them, and mentor may be a strong term, but that's also a very important one, but someone that they can connect to on a regular basis, not just their leader, but someone who has a similar job that can help them get oriented. And then the training component of this is, what's the advancement role? Remember I asked you, or I said for data that they're looking for advancement. Well, you can provide training for your employees, whether it's certifications, whether it's courses, micro skills, whatever they are looking for. But of course, you have to know what those are to be able to help them get there. And I was talking to an employer just recently who provides classes, graduate work, certifications. He pays for all this, and he's not concerned about if they leave. He's training them because they want to feel good about where they are. They feel supported by the employer. And it's a construction company, believe it or not. And that's a very high turnover area. And what he says about the turnover is, if they leave, they're going to have, one, think good about the company, but also they're either going to bring work back, or they may come back because they go somewhere else and they go, oh, this isn't very good. I don't like this place. So he didn't have that view at all. Yeah. So Carrie, you have your hand up. You wanted to say something?
Sure. This has to do more with the culture issue, so I don't know whether it fits in right now, Francis. But I've spent a lot of time in several law firms in a couple of places over the years. And when we were in Minneapolis, a very high quality legal community, and we often had to deal with, say, New York counsel. And inevitably, they would start the conversation by saying how busy they were, how hard they were working. And we would look at one another and say, well, we're kind of busy too. And then we'd notice we never got calls before 11 in the morning. And it turned out that we were working hard, but we were seizing the day early, and they were having their horrible commute. And then would have to work till 8 or 9 at night. So it's a loss of perspective, I think. Working hard can mean a lot of different things, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to kill yourself doing it. And so much of that message comes from the top.
Yeah. Well,
firms.
It's a great point. And sometimes we might think of the work day as a particular set of hours. And that may not be the best place or time for that particular employee to be within that area. And so we have to think differently. We have to adjust to some of the demands, not everyone, but some of the demands or requirements to get the best out of the people that we have. And you have to know who they are, what they are good at, and what roles can they fill that makes it as helpful as possible.
Yeah.
And I can see someone in the chat, there's quite a bit of discussion about the role of the manager, and it is very important. And we can talk all day about the importance of managers, and they're often overlooked because they aren't at the top and they aren't at the bottom. They're in the middle, and they do need more. So this next area, I'm just going to keep rolling through this because I want to make sure we give you an opportunity to get together for discussion. But the rewards and recognition, this often gets seen as salary and benefits. It is partly that. It is something you should be aware of, but it's not the only thing. You can give rewards in other ways. People do like to get things. So that's great, but rewards might be some time off to do some community service work. Rewards might be allowing employees to make decisions about things that they could do within the company that is not part of their job. So those are not necessarily expensive or things that cost. And just you have to be conscious of what their interests and values and what brings purpose for them. Now, recognition is another area that, of course, ranges from, the big celebration, highlighting people up front, and know that there are some people that really do not enjoy that. And so actually it's counterproductive to put them up front because they're going to feel very much intimidated and so you want to think about enough about the differences between the people that you have. They might be satisfied with a note. And recognition can also just be the thank you, although be specific. Thank you, thank you, thank you, that was great, thank you, that was great. It loses its meaning after a fairly short amount of time, and they actually don't know what they did to be thanked for. So thank you, really handled that customer well, or thank you the way you answered the phone, or thank you for, that report, the summary was crisp, clear, we really got the point of it right off. That kind of feedback is really important for folks. And that is going into this feedback and performance. And I want to say one thing related to this, and I'm not being able to go through every aspect of these features, but feedback is helpful if it's specific, and both positive and negative. Like that wasn't done very well. Well, in which ways, right? So do they know the expectations? So the more specific the feedback is, the better that they're going to know how to act afterwards. So this last one, performance, there are companies that are moving away from the annual performance review process. And what they're doing is they're more regular meetings. I'm working with a client, it's a huge client, and they're doing away with the whole performance system. And they're doing it at the leader individual level, setting goals and connecting them on a regular basis, sometimes once a week. So there's no end of the year surprise. Oh, I thought I was doing great, right? I was getting these thank yous. And so there's no surprise there. All right, so I'm going to do the last one here. And this is a little bit different. It does build some internal community. It's called peer coaching. We have a handout for you related to this one. And let me just describe it to you, and then it's much more depth in the handout. So you can pair up 2 people or 3. And the idea is it builds in some accountability, personal accountability, but also organizational accountability. But it builds friendship, collegiality. And the way it works is you write 4, maybe 5 questions that are answered with yes or no. So for example, I'm going to make sure I'm on time every single day this week. Were you or weren't you? Yes or no. Or you can answer it with a number, 1 to 5. And the idea is those 5 questions you send to the other person or give to the other person, they send you their questions. And you ask each other your questions. And you do it weekly. You can do it online. And what it's doing is it's allowing the 2 people to connect at a personal and professional level. So it really does increase their accountability. I have a peer coach that I've had for 4 years. We've built actually quite a good friendship right now. It's an accountability system for myself and for this other person. And it is a way for you to drive different kind of connection, which is also what people are looking for. Okay. So a little more on millennials here. I don't know that I think we've said all this already, but they do expect job training. They expect the employer to teach them something or have the opportunities to learn. And then there's this about if you have engagement, you're going to have better productivity. And teams that are engaged. And there are lots of different ways to look at teams and how the behaviors of teams and whether they're aligned, as Tara was saying, aligned around the values, around the mission of the organization. So before I move forward with this, does anyone have anything they want to share related to this area of retention that you might be doing or that you've observed in clients? Because I'm not pretending I have all the answers, nor there's just too many here. So anybody have anything they want to add? I think, Leanne, you mentioned a few things earlier, but yeah, Doug, go ahead.
A trend in some of the big companies, and I'm bringing it to some of my companies, is sabbaticals.
Mhm.
So you think about that person, the manager in the middle that loves what they do. They don't really want to be an executive and they're dedicated to the company, but they might get burned out after 5 or 10 years and maybe leave just for a change. But
Yeah.
if they know that they're going to get a month off paid to go do whatever the heck they'd like to do, and the only requirement is they have to come back and tell what they learned about themselves and about whatever else. I was just on the phone with one of my guys, and he was in Belgium because when you've worked there for this particular company for 5 years, he takes you to Belgium.
Wow.
Because it's a part of their heritage and where some of the core stuff came from as far as what they
Yeah.
do. So
Yeah.
but I mean,
That's-
just pretty cool stuff,
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a great example of a reward. You might not think of it that way, and it shouldn't just be restricted to academia because they get sabbaticals, but how you utilize it, what they learn, what they might bring back. And they're going to appreciate the company and you a lot more, which keeps them engaged and connected to all this purpose and value. So that's a good one.
We're finding that they missed their team because they had significant time away, as opposed to just a few days or a week, and they reflect on, boy, I really miss Bill and Sarah and whatever. And now I'm kind of anxious to get back. And
Yeah. It looks like Holly is talking about she coaches clients to find ways to communicate their needs before jumping to another employer. So that would be sort of your exit interview or trying to figure out what they are. Well, you can also talk to them about this during the work day while they're employed, right? Are you doing your best job? Is there anything I can do to help you do better? So take a look at these questions here. This kind of fits rather nicely. How would you like to grow within the organization? Do you feel a sense of purpose? And you'll begin to find out what their goal careers are and whether they want to stay. If they say, I want to go and become a doctor, or I want to go and get an advanced degree, they're not going to stay. So how long will they be there? And so, what we're currently not doing as a company, are you able to do your best work every day? So these are the kinds of conversations that they're much more personal. They're much more connected to the employee and what the employee wants. So that gets to their purpose, their mission, their values in life. And you begin to know your employees a lot better. And it can be very helpful to understanding what your movement is going to be. So this is a really complex area that we're covering in a very short amount of time. And I hope you get at least some suggestions or ideas. We've tried to keep some specifics in here. And before we wrap this up, we want to put you into breakout groups.
Francis, I just want to note that Rick had his hand up, so I just want to make sure you may not have seen that. So Rick, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah,
I just wanted to add that we eliminated the performance evaluations many years ago. And the only way that you can really get that success is by doing instant feedback, having one-on-ones with all of your team, and really identifying those things that you just talked about, Francis, because it can backfire if you don't do that. And, but the performance evaluation is such an archaic thing, and the larger your operation is, the harder it is. I've worked in properties where I had 100 employees under me, and there's no way I'm going to remember what every single employee did for 1 year and try and put it into documentation, but also oftentimes it's tied right to their salary. So it was offensive. And we made this switch, and it's getting the newer managers to really understand that your team is your asset and you need to get to know them on that level so you can speak to both the great things they do and the areas that they need to improve.
Yeah, that's a great example, Rick, and congratulations for doing that. Good for you. And it is a good, important piece. So anybody else have ideas or things that you've observed or doing?
Francis, this is Leanne. I was gonna say, when you, right before you went to this slide, I was going to tell you that all of these questions are here. I didn't know that this was a slide you were gonna show, but these 5 questions are included in our one-on-ones that we do twice a year, and we don't refer to ours as a performance management system per se. Ours is an employee development program, and we really take note. We ask each employee to just complete, there's like 7 or 8 questions. These are definitely in them. And then what they receive a bonus that's driven by them. So they have characteristics that they know that they're being, that they can reach the greatest amount of bonus by being a better team player, delivering quality, being attendance is one of them, safety. And we have ways to measure that because of being able to submit ideas. And what I really had in my years of performance review management, which I'm so glad those days are like gone. This is completely driven by the employee. And it really works. So they know what they need to do. You know, how can I get an 8% bonus, you know, versus a 4%? You know, everyone goes in with a 4%, but how can I be better? But they give us feedback and they give us ideas and how we can grow the organization, how we can, what can we do as a company? What can we do as, you know, a team to make this a better environment for you? So I really, really like seeing that. And this is great. This is great information to use. So thank you for sharing this.
Well, thank you for sharing your ideas and what you're doing, because that's a very important part of helping your folks stay and keep energized, because you're the manager, and it comes really down to the manager. Same with Rick's comment. It's at that level, the person that's directly connected to that employee that really needs to understand this the most. But so thank you for sharing that.
Angela, did you have something that you'd like
yeah.
to say into the breakout?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, this is Angela Hansen, Range Culture Co. Just a reminder that using our strengths every day, if we understand as employees what our strengths are and we get the opportunity to use them every day or at least a few times a week, we do feel like we're living our purpose. And so, you know, offering employees some way to assess what their strengths are may be another way to get at how to help employees live their purpose.
Yeah, that's a great point. I use assessments frequently, and using the strengths, and leaders often forget that, but you can use strengths to mitigate those weaknesses or challenges that you might have, because you're already good at those things. You identify that in people. So thank you for that. And there are lots of different ones, and whether it's behavioral or personal, you know, your personalities, I think some have more value than others, but everybody uses whatever they think is useful, as long as you use it and not just put it up on the shelf after you do it. Yeah. Other thoughts?
I'm just going to mention a couple of things before we put you into breakout groups, because there's been such rich discussion and in the chat as well, to highlight a few things around the integrated and interrelationships between all the things that we're talking about. And Rick, really want to call out, thank you for emphasizing that eliminating a performance evaluation process has to be done extremely responsibly, and I completely support it. But as you were pointing out, because everything is integrated together, we've been talking a lot about middle managers and the opportunity to focus on middle managers or the management level to impact or influence the employee experience, because it's been noted in the chat very rightly that employees are leaving their managers more often than they're leaving their organizations. But sometimes, unless we're looking at the whole system, if the manager is not being cared for and isn't experiencing the culture, then they can't actually do that for their employees. And so if you start at middle management, which many organizations do, without addressing the experience that middle management is having with their leadership, you have missed the walking the talk piece that creates the authenticity of the experience in the organization. And I do see that an awful lot with clients, where they're trying to look at a symptom rather than going to the root cause, and then kind of going around in a circle. So maybe you've seen that too. So I just want to, and then Carrie mentioned something about this busyness or people being very busy and always describing this busyness, which is a huge cultural component we have in our organizations. And it goes back to what Francis was discussing around recognition. What are people recognized for in the organization? What is the cultural recognition that happens? And many organizations that I work with or have worked in, busyness is like a moniker for like, I'm important, and not necessarily thinking about how to do things smarter or differently or efficiently, and taking time for rest and relaxation, and taking time for rejuvenation and sabbaticals and creativity and innovation. And so being really mindful of what is the culture already emphasizing in our organizations can be a real opportunity to think about from a reward and recognition standpoint. So before you get into your groups, I just wanted to highlight some of the really important things that have been said in the chat. And we're going to put you into groups now of 3, and we're going to give you about 10 minutes to have a discussion together. And if you just flip to the next slide, Francis, then we will give you a slide that gives you some questions to ask. So you can see the 2 questions here. What is your greatest retention opportunity now at your organization? And of course, you can think about this at a particular client as well. And what will you commit to doing next? We all know that it's important, particularly in a group setting, to make a commitment. And so we're going to just ask you to cover those couple of things in your groups of 3 in the next 10 minutes. We know it won't be enough time, but hopefully it's great to get you started and having some accountability partnership in a group and some peer coaching as well. So unless there's any questions, I'm going to go ahead and open up the rooms.
Yeah, it looks like we have 1 question, maybe 2. I'm trying to see if I can see everybody. So I see
Great,
Carrie and someone else had their hand up, I think. Was it John? No?
Yeah.
All right. Carrie?
Well, I did have my.
Sure. Just as a follow-on to my comparison of cultures in law firms, one of the other things we found when we were working with New York Council is we were always waiting on them to get their work done. It's not so much that they were any busier than we were, but it seemed like they were working really hard to get not as much done effectively. And some of that came from the fact that there was a fundamental, I wouldn't say it's a lack of trust, but a need for everybody up the food chain to have their hands on a piece of work instead of trusting people to just let it fly at an appropriate level. And that's that empowerment thing is, you know, if you have an young associate drafting something, then it goes up to, you know, the next level, then the department chair, and there's a report to the managing partner about what just went out the door. It does take some extra time to get things out. So, and your associates, if you let them let things fly, learn a lot faster.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Carrie. John, did you have something to share?
Well, yes. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave to talk with some people who are working here at the house. But I really, this is a fabulous discussion and presentation that you've done. And I really support everything that's been noted in the chats and all of the points that you've been making. I just wanted to share 2 pieces of experience. Dana and I some time ago did some work on what motivates people to do their best work and what some key factors were. And one of the top factors that people identified was the opportunity to take initiative without supervision, not having to check in with lots of people before you make a decision or take some action. And that really applies at multiple levels. And I think that has a lot to do with how people feel engaged, excuse me, and involved in the organization. The other thing I wanted to mention, going back to purpose, I'll share an example of what might be considered bad management. Over the years, I have heard many managers at many different levels in the organization make statements like, our purpose is to make money. That's our only purpose. That's why we're here. You know, that's the quote unquote bottom line. Well, you know what I'm saying here. When that kind of communication happens, it's not very motivating. Not
At their
very,
own peril,
not
right,
very
John?
engaging. You know,
They can
certainly
say that.
organizations and businesses and companies need to be profitable, and that should be a byproduct of all of the things you're talking about.
Thank you, John. So important.
you.
We didn't mention that, you know, what you're saying is critical, because actually when you do all of these things, the research dramatically shows that you will make more money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, another example I'll share. Dana's heard this many times. Some time ago, when I was beginning a strategic planning process with a group of managers, and there was a high-level boss there and all of his direct reports. And I hadn't worked with this group before, and I started by asking them, you know, what business they're in and what their overall purpose was. And I purposely didn't want to have an open discussion in that moment, because my sense was the boss would probably say, here's what business we're in, and everyone else would agree. So I asked everybody to write down just on a slip of paper, you know, what your purpose or primary business is, and just, you know, shoot it up to me. And I read them out. And as you might expect, they were all different. And they were all based on whatever part of the organization they happened to be working in. You know, whether you were in finance or in quality or production, whatever, the response was consistent with that. Well, and I asked them to talk about that more. And first of all, saying, you know, what do you notice? And a lot of people said, let's just get on with this process. It's all the same. You know, it's all fine. Well, I didn't let them stop there. And sooner, in a little while, people started sharing examples of, well, if you think that's our purpose, and someone else in a different department, for example, has a different purpose, maybe that's why we don't get this or that from one another, and why we seem to be in competition. So it turned out to be a very unifying discussion as time went on. Anyway, I'll just share that
Thank you,
example,
John.
and
So
now
much.
I have to leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John.
Yeah.
Where the group has become a little bit smaller as people have had to go off to other things. So we're going to give you a little shorter time to do the breakouts, because some of your groups are smaller. So we're just going to get you into groups for about 5 minutes. It's not going to be long enough time, but we really want you to have an opportunity to connect with each other. And then we'll come back and just do a short debrief and close.
Yeah. And this is all unique to your client base or your business, right? It's all contextual. Yeah, Dana?
Yeah, I don't know. Are we doing a little report out? Because I
Yes.
just heard something really that made me think about from Leanne Lowe at Yodel. She was talking about how they had hired this great person who had all sorts of potential, but the way the organization is structured, it didn't look like there were going to be lots of opportunities. And she worked to make sure that he could move to something that was a little more challenging after he managed one thing. And I just think there are always opportunities, especially if the top leaders have some imagination and think expansively about, you know, how can we do things better? How can we restructure? How can we move, you know, give people more opportunities to create new initiatives and innovations? There's always something that can be done that makes it exciting.
Yeah, great. Thanks to both of you.
Yeah.
Someone else, anything?
Sure, I'll go. Holly and I, she's starting to build a payroll employees. And so she said that she's trying to be mindful of how she's going about doing it. I had just this general question. I wonder if ACE can answer it at some time in a program, which is often I hop into a culture and it's not clear to me who has decision-making authority and at what level. So on a project, I'm usually kind of the project manager, but I'm not the one who makes the ultimate decisions as to how it goes. So the idea of coming in from the outside to an organization and how you work with them would be something I'd be very interested in hearing about in the future. I think a lot of consultants may feel that way.
I agree, Carrie, that a lot of consultants may feel that way, but I think that's also another epidemic inside organizations, that there isn't a defined decision-making process and employees don't know who to go to get a decision made. And they struggle and sort of suffer with trying to make that happen, and it feels extremely bureaucratic. So it's definitely a great topic to discuss in a lot more detail. Thank you.
Yeah.
for bringing it.
Successful project depends on information flow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also being really clear on expectations.
Yes.
Everything from, are you having to carry things, and this as a part of your role in the job, or, completing particular types of assignments that absolutely everything is a part of it. Then where the decision making is, but that often doesn't happen. We have job descriptions that are more general and skills, but not really about, and that's where, assigning an advisor or a mentor or somebody to help a new employee understand really clearly about what the job expects. And it's tough. Yeah, it's difficult. So
Your time has
we
all
are,
been so valuable. Thank you so much. We are right at the
Yeah.
top of the hour. We know we could talk for hours on end about this with all of you. I wish that we had a full day because there's so much to share with each other. And we'll definitely make sure that you get the chat and the slides. And Francis mentioned the peer coaching handout that we'll make sure is distributed to all of you. And you've been inspiring, and there's so much awesome stuff happening in this group. So thank you for all the work that you're doing out in the world. And we really appreciate you coming this morning.